Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to PFS Global Support. My name is Adam Held, and I am your host. This is our very first podcast, so I just want to welcome anyone listening to the show. Our mission at PFS Global Support is to provide support to the men who are suffering with post-Finasteride syndrome, otherwise known as PFS, as well as guidance for their loved ones, for their wives, for their girlfriends, for the people that are also affected, the secondary victims of this disease. Before I go any further, I do want to just lay down a few rules for the show going forward. The first thing is that this show does not provide legal advice. Most of the men that have gotten sick from post-Finasteride syndrome did so by taking a prescription drug, one that was sold to them by a doctor, one that the FDA had told us was safe, that had no long-term side effects, and the drug company had not put any warning on the drug about these long-term side effects. So I cannot and will not give legal advice if you're involved in a lawsuit. That is not the purpose of this podcast. Secondly, any guests that appear on our show do not have to use their real name. Anonymity is important, especially in light of the somewhat personal nature of many of the side effects of post-Finasteride syndrome. I choose to use my real name. The guests do not have to. So I will not mention the guest's name, or I will not tell you if it's a pseudonym or not. Third rule, no profanity. And the fourth rule, if on the show, you come on the show, a guest, I do urge everyone to tell the truth. It is easy, considering the severe trauma that this disease causes to the body, to exaggerate symptoms or to place blame for things outside of the disease, to place blame on the disease for those things. So please tell the truth, be as honest as you can about your symptoms and about what this disease has taken from you and what problems it has caused for you. Today's show is going to be just 15 minutes, and I'm just going to tell my story. Next week, we're going to have a guest, a person to talk about some of the effects of castration on a man. They are an expert in the field, and so that will help give maybe some information to the men suffering from post-Finasteride syndrome, how to live with this and what to expect. So my story begins in March of 2010. In 2009, I had moved to China to teach in an international school in China. I had moved there with my fiancée. While we were in America, her job was as a pharmaceutical sales rep, I'm not kidding, for Sharing Plow. She quit that job in August 2009, and we moved to China together. I began teaching. She began doing an internship as a counselor in the school. We began having problems in the relationship, mainly because I loved China. I loved being out, talking to Chinese people, diving in, and she wasn't as into that as I was. So we began having problems. There was some stress in the relationship, and at some point in February, I think, of 2010, she suggested that we go to the doctor and we think about, getting some antidepressants. She wanted to try antidepressants. She thought that would help us through our relationship difficulty. Before this appointment, maybe 3 weeks earlier, a friend of mine had mentioned how, he said, "You look really haggard. You look old. What's happening?" And I explained to him, Karen and I were going through this difficulty, and he said, "Well, just want to let you know I'm here for you." But that wasn't what I remembered. I remembered the "you're getting old, you look terrible" comment from him. So I had asked Karen. She was in the know. I mean, she worked in the pharmaceutical industry for several years, and I said, "How do you feel about Propecia?" And she said, "Oh, that's fine. We can get that prescription as well." So we went to the doctor, an American doctor, Yale-educated doctor. Not that it matters, but it does, I think, when you're in that doctor's office. And we had the discussion, and I asked him about my hair loss. I said, "What do you think? Was this Propecia safe?" And he said the words that often are the last thing I think about before I go to bed. He said, "Yeah, it's a safe drug, but I will say that I had one patient several years ago that took the drug, and he said that it ruined his life." And I asked him to elaborate, and he said, "Well, I don't know much detail, but just between you and me, this guy was a hypochondriac." And fortunately, I didn't listen to the one story. I believed what I read in the leaflet. I believed what I read on the internet. I believed my doctor who prescribed it. I believed my girlfriend who said it was safe. Against my better judgment, I began taking Propecia. Things were fine for, I would say, the first few months. I noticed my first side effect, which at the time I did not attribute to Propecia. It was nothing on the label, but in October of 2010, I began having major sleep difficulty. I had no. I was actually dating several women, teaching at the time. I had a good life, a really, really good life. But I just didn't sleep anymore. I would fall asleep for like an hour and then just wake up, and I couldn't fall back asleep. And I also began having panic attacks. Very few, but I've had a few. The first time in my life I'd ever had a panic attack was in October, late October, and I was in my apartment, which was on the 14th floor. And I remember as the panic attack hit, I was so scared I thought I might hurt by jumping or something. I had no idea what it was. I was just crying uncontrollably. So I called my mom, and she talked me through it. And, I went to the doctor to get some sleep medicine, some Ambien. That helped. I was able to sleep a little bit better, and I kept on that regimen for the next couple months. And then in February of 2011, the panic attacks got worse, and I remember going to school one day, chemistry teacher. It was about 6 a.m. I went in early, as I always do, and I just went into my classroom. I turned the lights off. I put my head down, and I cried for about an hour. I was so scared. And so it was after that event that I finally went to the doctor, and they obviously, of course, thought I was depressed, and that's all it was. I was still on the Propecia. The doctor never made a connection. So they put me on Cymbalta, which helped, and things continued like that for a while. I would say the first sexual side effect I noticed wasn't until the end when I decided to stop taking Propecia. Because in April of 2011, I decided to wean off the Propecia. I did a slow 3-month wean. It's recommended by someone at a pharmacy. I think a pharmacist may have recommended it. So my last pill was in June or I think July. And right before I took my last pill, a few days earlier, I noticed numbness in my penis. And that freaked me out. So I immediately stopped taking the Propecia. And that's when I went online and I did a much different search this time. I did Propecia and genital numbness, and then I found, too late for me, I found the Propecia Help website. I found some other websites that I had never seen before, and I began reading, and to my horror, I saw all my symptoms, all these problems that these men have been suffering with, and I realized, oh my God, I had done this to myself. Well, I was leaving that next day to go to Singapore, so I stopped taking the Propecia. I took Cymbalta with me to continue on that, and I flew to Singapore to begin teaching, and immediately felt better. In fact, the first month I was in Singapore, I was, eating more. Everything was, my libido came back. I felt like I had dodged a bullet. I remember several times just tears of joy, thinking, oh my God, I survived this. The fate that could have happened to me, I've avoided it. My body was its old self. In fact, I lost 18 pounds in that first month, in spite of eating the same Subway footlong every day, 3 chocolate chip cookies, a bag of Doritos. My diet was more, and my weight went down, which I don't know. So, anyways, after about a month, I crashed. And so the symptoms of PFS, for those that maybe are uninitiated, or if you're listening to this and you're not sure what PFS is, the symptoms of PFS are this, or the timeline, I should say. So while on the Propecia, you may or may not have side effects, and then 10 to 14 days after quitting. Well, for me, it was less than that. I would say within 3 days after quitting, I began to feel better, and that's because the dihydrotestosterone in your body, since Propecia is a 5-alpha reductase type 2 inhibitor, which is what converts testosterone to DHT, since the Propecia is out of your system, the 5-alpha reductase type 2 increases, your DHT increases, and you begin to feel like yourself. You have a stopping or resolution of the side effects. That takes place over that next few weeks. And then for up to a month, you feel like yourself. You're horny. There's sensation in your penis. You can sleep. All these things happened to me when I was in that first month in Singapore. In fact, I had two girls that I was pursuing, 2 young girls, 23. I was at this time 34, and it was good. Life was good, I was thankful. But then, unfortunately, this resolution of symptoms is short-lived, and you undergo what's called a crash. My crash occurred, I remember I was in a Starbucks on a Sunday grading papers, and I just felt this cloud coming, and I looked out the window, and I could almost see physically a poison brown cloud coming. I began to have a panic attack. That night, I couldn't sleep, and that was it. Everything slowly ebbed away from that point on. Again, it was as if my body could no longer accept the hormones that were back in the bloodstream. And now I'm stuck in this post-finasteride syndrome situation. So some of the side effects for those listening of post-finasteride syndrome, loss of libido, which is true of me, erectile dysfunction, so an inability to get an erection. Now, I can still get erections. Some men get weight gain. I have gynecomastia, loss of muscle mass and strength, decreased size of the penis and testicles. Physical symptoms can include anemia, fatigue, lack of energy, lack of initiative, and then the emotional symptoms. And the emotional symptoms are depression and can be sleep, insomnia, sleep issues. So, and that's where I am now. It's been 2 years, 2+ years since I've taken Propecia, yet I'm still dealing with this. My hope with this podcast, again, as I said, is to provide support, to provide information to the men around the world that are suffering, but also to urge Merck to please help us. All I want is a cure. I want my life back. I know that research has shown that this drug has done this and can do this. To this point, the medical community has met us, the PFS men, with an air of indifference, an air of disbelief. But that's not the truth. The truth is that we were healthy, young, healthy men are no longer healthy. And in my case, I don't even feel young anymore. So please, if you're listening, you can make a donation to the PFS Foundation, pfsfoundation.org. And I'll be back next Sunday, 7 a.m. Central Time in the U.S., so that's 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for listening.